Hello, welcome, good afternoon to Afternoons on Football Nation Radio, FNA here. I'll be your host, Rick D'Andrea. Stay with us shortly and we'll be getting underway and there's plenty to talk about, so bear with us. Yes, welcome and good afternoon to everybody listening to us, viewing us on Facebook Live via our FNR app or via www.footballnationradio.com, and welcome to Afternoons on FNR. I'm your host, Rick D'Andrea. Joining me for a nice big chat about all things European and world football, as we do on a Friday here. Louise Tafford to my left, Damon across the board here. Unfortunately, Adriano Del Monte, he'll be joining us in the second hour. But guys, plenty to talk about, plenty of big games happening overnight as well, and plenty of games occurring over the weekend. And as we do at the top of every hour here, Louise, a little bit of a splashing of news headlines, please.
Thanks, Rick. Well, La Liga president Javier Tebas has ruled out the El Clasico being played in New York this season as part of plans to stage a match in the United States. Tebas signed a 15-year deal with Relevant, the organisers of the International Champions Cup, to help promote La Liga's global appeal and increase interest in football in North America. And on a different note, the La Liga president has expressed concern as to whether UEFA apply financial fair play properly. He has mentioned issues going beyond PSG and Manchester City, also including Inter Milan in the wake of the Luka Modric saga. Unai Emery has backed Mesut Ozil after the German midfielder announced his retirement from international football last month. Emery said Ozil is part of the family. However, he will have to live with the criticism he continues to receive in Germany following his decision. Manchester City's owner, Sheikh Mansour's cousin, Sheikh Khalid bin Zayed, tried and failed with a $3.5 billion bid to buy Liverpool after approaching the Reds in late 2017. Khalid is one of the most successful entrepreneurs in the Middle East, and the $3.5 billion takeover would have been a world record. Well, we've recently seen the Fly on the Wall Manchester City documentary series released, and now the La Liga are following suit. La Liga have confirmed the first ever Spanish original series named Six Dreams, a Fly on the Wall documentary about the Spanish top flight, and it will be aired on Amazon Prime in conjunction with MediaPro. The filming process took place last year with 6 one-hour episodes focusing on 6 individuals, including 3 players and 2 coaches. Well, Valencia are doing everything within their power to sign PSG's winger Gonçalo Guedes on a permanent deal. Burnley boss Sean Dyche felt the officials succumbed to pressure from Olympiacos players during his side's 3-1 defeat in the first leg of their Europa League playoff in Athens. Both sides were awarded penalties, and Burnley lost their defender Ben Gibson, who was sent off in the 59th minute. And more concrete, Bordeaux have offered Thierry Henry the job as head coach on a long-term contract. The 41-year-old has asked for more time to consider their offer, and he said he will make a decision over the weekend. And finally, Mario Balotelli has finally spoken about the summer of confusion, saying it was my choice to stay with Nice, and Patrick Vieira changed 80% of my decision. Rick, those are some of the headlines floating around the world of football. More later on in the hour.
Thank you very much, Louise, and you weren't too far off the mark. There is so much to talk about. I think what we'll do is we'll start with the La Liga news, and we'll start with Javier Tebas, who is the La Liga chief, and we'll discuss, I think there's a twofold to what he has been saying over the last 24 hours. The first part, I feel, is about the El Clasico and La Liga matches being played in the US. And then the second part was, as you touched on there, the financial fair play aspect of it all. And his criticism of some of these big teams across Europe that seemingly are spending a lot of money, and UEFA may not be cracking down on them too heavily, or at least too much in terms of FFP. We'll start with the America stuff. I've seen throughout the week, and I think we've all touched on it here, a lot of the players do not want to play an official match overseas for points. And at the same time, Tebas and a lot of the players are also saying they will not be playing a game of El Clasico, such a meaningful match overseas.
Nor should they. And we've discussed this over the past couple of shows this week. And I think at the crux of it, the reason why the players are rebelling against this decision is because primarily they were not consulted by La Liga. So that has been the issue. The Players Union over the past couple of days has come out and said that their members, that being the players, were not consulted. And that's why we've seen a number of the club's captains come out and take a real stance on this. And the other issue under that is, of course, the fans. They want to make sure that the fans are still being included in all of the games, rightfully so, and keep La Liga games within the country and not export them out.
Yeah, I'm not surprised that the players are quite upset about this. I agree with your points that you've made. The zero consultation, I just think there's a lack of respect there towards the players to not consult them about something like this. This is a big move and a big change to move a game for points in La Liga, arguably the strongest football competition in the world, or domestic competition, moving across the world to the USA and Canada. It's a huge change. So to not speak with the players beforehand, I just think that shows a little lack of respect. And yeah, I just disagree with this, just from the football purist point of view.
I agree with you from the football purist point of view, but I think to me this starts to talk on a bigger level for me.
Marketing.
Is the game, is it a traditional game or is it a marketing game? Who actually rules the roost? This is the big thing now.
Well, as we heard, this is La Liga's bid to, promote the global appeal of their league in other parts of America. So that is the predominant focus as to why they're trying to move one game across to the US every year for the next 15 years.
It's interesting because they have the International Champions Cup where some of the big boys of world football come across to the United States, including Barcelona and Real Madrid. Now, perhaps they don't see that as a solution to tapping into that North American market. I'm not sure. What are your thoughts?
Well, that's because, from my opinion, they don't ever field their strongest team or bring their strongest team. So that might not attract, the biggest crowds. Obviously, if you have no Messi, as to when you do have Messi, you're going to attract a lot more bums on seats. And obviously that's not what has been the case with the International Champions Cup. They haven't gotten that effect. And so this is why they're looking at taking a real game for real points across shores.
And I guess when you also factor in the report that we went with on Monday with both Barcelona and Real Madrid having one of their lowest home crowds in 10 years, I think it was, for Los Blancos, you can understand why they want to explore outside and other shores.
Just to clear up the Real Madrid attendance, that game kicked off at 10:15 p.m. So that's obviously one of the biggest reasons why they drew such a low crowd, which fans and players aren't happy about either.
So there's plenty to talk about, and there's plenty going on there as well. But just a final point on this whole El Clasico moment. It's been interesting. The Players Union, like you said, Louise and Damon, they weren't consulted. We remember back to the Julen Lopetegui World Cup saga before he got sacked. There was the discussion point about Andres Iniesta and Sergio Ramos really talking to the board at the time, really talking to the assistant coaches, pleading to have Lopetegui remain as the head coach despite what had just happened for him signing with Real Madrid. They weren't listened to. It might be the case, if you're a La Liga chief out there, maybe you do listen to the people who do bring the bums on seats and do bring you into a world market.
Well, if it comes to it, they've said that they will go on strike. So that is the drastic point of this. But no chance were they ever going to take an El Clasico to the US.
Never.
No chance. No chance.
Displaced, and you would have put too many noses out of joint. And obviously Tebas, he still has his nose out of joint with regards to the whole financial fair play discussion. And I think it comes up a very regular basis around July and August every year. How do some of these big teams manage to keep on buying, improving their squads, splashing the cash, and not really selling too many people going the other way? Now, all of a sudden, Tebas has had his opinion on it. He mentioned PSG and Manchester City as being the two big clubs that somehow have really not had too much punishment their way in relation to financial fair play. He also mentioned Inter in relation to the Luka Modric saga. What are your thoughts on this? I mean, does he have a case here, or is it just a bit of sour grapes?
I think a bit of sour grapes. It's interesting he brought up the Modric and Inter, given that he didn't actually make the move across to Inter. And the quote, have no money to buy players, but then offer a mountain of money. I'm not sure if he knows how much money Inter have. So I think a little bit of sour grapes.
I also wonder, though, just before I get your opinion as well, Louise, because we've only seen really one of the two big Spanish clubs really splash the cash, is he just trying to defend them at the same time? Because they're sort of trying to be a little bit more, toe the line of this financial fair play rather than constantly buy. They've obviously had to sell in order to make things meet. I don't know. It's an interesting one. There's plenty to obviously talk about, but I just don't know.
Well, I don't know. I just think, obviously, he singled out, two of the biggest clubs in Europe, PSG, Manchester City, and they have been doing a lot of the spending. They have been doing a lot of the spending. So he's got a good point, but I don't know. Maybe UEFA will have to crack down on the whole situation. And Inter, again, yeah, you're right. They didn't actually sign Luka Modric, so
Correct.
that didn't go through because he had the $1 billion release clause like Cristiano Ronaldo.
Barcelona and Real Madrid, and even Atletico to an extent, have been the dominant teams of European football the last, say, 5 or 6 years. Perhaps he now sees PSG and Man City spending all this money as a threat to the dominance of Spanish football.
Well, we'd love to hear anybody have their opinion on that, and especially that point, Damon. Do get in touch with us, Facebook Live. We are on here for another good 50 minutes. I'd love to hear some comments on what your thoughts are on Tebas, his comments in relation to our Clásico, in relation to financial fair play. There's even a bit of word going around, guys, about Kylian Mbappe and him possibly even being caught up, even though his move has been made official, to PSG. It's very interesting that all of a sudden, the 19-year-old, soon-to-be 20-year-old French international, the World Cup star, gets caught up in all this. I thought that matter was all clarified and, everybody was hunky-dory moving on. Damon, do you want to give us a quick recap as to what actually is the latest?
So it's been reported that because of financial fair play, that PSG may be forced to either sell Kylian Mbappe or forfeit the loan move from Monaco to PSG. So we potentially could see a return to Monaco. I don't think so, but that's what's being reported.
Any chance?
Return to Monaco, no, I don't think so. I think if they're forced to sell him, I think Real Madrid may come calling.
Would you sell him? Now, we've talked about this before. Would you now sell Mbappe to Real Madrid, or would you now sell Neymar to Real Madrid? That's now the biggest question possibly going around in world football.
I think Neymar, just given the fact that Mbappe is only 19 years of age, so you can build a 10 to 15-year project around the superstar.
Louise?
Well, that's it. And I think when these rumours were going around that Neymar, when he had that spat with Cavani and he wanted to move away from PSG, and, the reports were coming out saying that Real Madrid was on the cards potentially, we heard at the time that Real Madrid's president didn't want Neymar. And previously, when Neymar was at Barcelona, I think that was when he tried to actually get Neymar to sign for the club, and Neymar didn't want to go to Real Madrid, so that's where the bad blood kind of came in. So the other aspect of that was at the time when Cristiano Ronaldo was at the club, Neymar and him wouldn't fit in the dressing room. Two big personalities. Cristiano Ronaldo obviously rules the roost, and there was no room for Neymar. So now that Cristiano Ronaldo isn't there and Real Madrid have a bit of room, maybe Neymar can shift over to Real Madrid.
Would be a nice little move if you are the French international to all of a sudden go and play at Los Blancos. But speaking of bad blood, now this one has dominated the best part of 5 weeks of the summer transfer window and the opening few weeks of the respective European competitions. The latest on Mesut Ozil. So the Arsenal coach, Unai Emery, has come out and defended the German international, or the former German international as he now is, saying that at Arsenal we are like family, we look after one another. And this is in response to the Bayern Munich chief Karl-Heinz Rummenigge's constant attacks really on the playmaker that, ultimately there is no racism in German football, but even though despite Ozil feeling that there was. I think this is just now becoming another episode of Jerry Springer, to put it in another way. It's just going from one layer to another, and he said, then she said, then he said, and he's rebutted back, and she's come in with this. What do you guys make of all this?
It's a disappointing sort of scenario, and it's disappointing that it's dragged on for so long. But what I take out of it is it's great to see that Ozil has a lot of support now. Emre coming out and showing his support for Ozil, and he's not the first to do so. So it's not the whole world against him, which is good to see. And I think Ozil hasn't had a great start to the season, but I think with support like what we've seen from Unai Emery, I think he can get back to his best football.
Won't be long. It won't be long. All Arsenal, like I've mentioned over the last couple of weeks, probably don't face one of the big two teams in Manchester City and Chelsea, because obviously they will stifle his ability to create on the ball and what he is able to do. But now that they obviously play West Ham this week, and we'll preview the 10 EPL matches in our next hour when we are in this studio, and we'll have a special guest on the phone to be able to do this. Against West Ham, he almost needs to get an assist, or if not a goal, just to really settle himself, maybe get rid of any emotion that is within him that he has been copying over the last couple of months, and then really he'll be able to close that chapter on that book very, very quickly.
Yeah, I agree. And Arsenal need to get some points because currently they're 0, and all I keep seeing is that those Emery out posters.
Already.
But yes. Well, speaking of out, but this is the opposite now. Thierry Henry in. Well, we reported earlier in the week that Gus Poyet, the former Bordeaux coach, had been told that his services were no longer required at Les Girondins. Thierry Henry has met with the owners, I think it's CAPG Group in New York. They have obviously discussed contract terms. They've discussed project lengths. The latest reports going around is that the French international is close to signing. He has not done it yet. He has been told of a long-term project he should sign. Hasn't done it yet. Any worries that this one won't get over the line, guys?
I'm confident that it will get over the line. I think Henry can have a great managerial career, and I don't think there's many better places to start. In Ligue 1 with Bordeaux, a club who featured in the Champions League regularly when I was growing up as a kid. Haven't been there for a little while. Haven't been able to defeat the likes of Monaco, PSG, obviously Lyon, Marseille. So I think this is a great project, and it's interesting to hear that he is considering the long-term project aspect of it. I thought he would be sort of tempted by that.
Well, I would have thought originally when this sort of came out, I thought to myself, he doesn't want to stay there just for, say, 36 games, does he? He wants to sort of maybe be there for a few years. That's what you would sort of want in a first-time coach who really hasn't had any experience. I mean, if you really count, the only experience he's had was a part of the Belgium national team as an assistant coach. That's, what's that, the best part of, say, 7 games, 8 games at the most, really, at a high intensity level. Why would you not?
I think he'll jump on this. I think that's just to give him a little bit of time to read through the documents and whatever else he has to read through. And I think he will sign for Bordeaux because, as we've discussed over the past couple of shows, he wants a job. This is the perfect opportunity. They're giving him an opportunity, so why wouldn't you take it?
Not a whole lot to lose either.
No. And Bordeaux, they were in and around the Europa League mark last season. Yes, their start hasn't been the greatest, and so they are floundering near the bottom of the table. But if all of a sudden, maybe a few more wins over the next couple of weeks, leading into, we'll probably end up taking over, say, beyond the international break at the end of the month and start of next month. But if maybe one win can occur between now and that period, Henry comes in, steadies the ship, and then they continue on. Europa League is not out of possibility.
Well, no, and he certainly has a bit of pressure. Well, I think he has a little bit of pressure on him to, try and see that Bordeaux at least make the top 6.
Do you reckon they can? Because
I don't
top
know.
4 makes you Europa League in France. Top 6, I think, would probably be in and around a Europa League qualifier. So that's where
playoffs.
Bordeaux will probably be aiming for.
What do you think?
I don't think they're good enough yet. They have the talent. I think the Malcolm one, I think, is the big issue. They haven't really replaced him yet. Some of their players that they have signed, there is still a little bit of financial fair play within the French organisation to still sort out. So that might still linger on for the next week or so. But if they can somehow pass all that, then yes.
Okay, well, what is a realistic target for Thierry Henry in his first season in charge at Bordeaux?
Realistically, top half. That has to be your aim if you're a first-year coach for a new club. Top half minimum. With the team that he does have, he can still get there. It's whether he's then adaptable enough and whether he is cunning enough to actually get the team there. That's the secondary part, and that's probably the harder part. I mean, whatever he has learned, he's learned under Roberto Martinez. Now, we know Martinez got Belgium to third at the World Cup, but what did he do at Wigan? Not much. What did he do in Everton? More or less in and around that sort of top half finish. So,
and that's obviously because of the players. Obviously,
Correct.
the players that you have in Belgium, Dries Mertens, Romelu Lukaku, Kevin De Bruyne, the list goes on. So
Correct.
all top quality players. So it's what you do with the players who aren't at that level and how far you can see them. But you're right, we don't really have too much to,
there's no real guide.
judge
Yeah.
Thierry Henry on his managerial career because it's so new.
Of course, and that's why I think he should take up this long-term project.
Well,
I think it could be the catalyst for his managerial career.
Absolutely. But speaking of Europa League, well, obviously a nice little segue there. There were a whole heap of games obviously played overnight. Now, this is the final qualification round, so it's obviously over 2 legs. This is the first leg that was played early this morning here in Australia. Plenty of games. I think it was some 18 to 24 games. I can't remember the exact number off the top of my head.
And how many 0-0 draws?
Oh, I'll let you tell me whilst you calculate that all, but I'll just run through some of the big results. Zenit St. Petersburg. Now, if you remember last week when we talked about Zenit, they were 4-0 down after the first leg. They were then 2-0 down in the 60-odd minute, plus then a man down at the same time.
2-0 up, not
2-0
down.
up, 2-0 up, sorry. And then all of a sudden they went on to score another 4 or 5 goals in extra time to somehow get through. Well, they've actually had a 3-1 win over the Norwegian side Molde in their first leg, which is good to see. Apoel, we've heard of them before plenty of times across Europe. They defeated 1-0 Astana as well as the former Champions League contenders we've had before. Seville, 1-0 away win. Very, very crucial, these away wins. I cannot stress enough how important they are in order to actually get a good footing and a good qualification period if you can. Sarpsborg from Norway, 3-1 over Maccabi Tel Aviv. Tel Aviv we've seen plenty of times in the Champions League over the years as well. Atalanta, 0-0, as you touched on, Louise, over FC Copenhagen. They're going to struggle, I'd say, in the second leg. Going to Denmark is a very tough gig on many an occasion. Basel 3-2. They had a win as well. Olympiacos 3-1 with the 10-man Burnley, and there's a whole heap of controversy, which we'll touch on in a few moments' time. Genk 5-2 over Bromby, so the Danes, mixed results you could say overnight as well. Rapid Vienna 3-1 over FCSB. Rangers 1-0. And finally, to round us out, Rosenborg 3-1 over, I can't even pronounce it, Shigneja. So part of my pronunciation
Bravo,
there.
well
but
done.
We'll go with that. We'll get on to the Olympiacos match. I think that was probably one of the bigger, if not the biggest clash over the last, say, 4 hours or so.
Yeah.
3-1. Olympiacos did really turn it on. Burnley did have a few injury issues coming into this as well, as we've sort of mentioned over the last couple of weeks in relation to the English Premier League. But there was a lot of pre-match and post-match incidents, even an official incident on the pitch. But we'll start with the pre-match. There was, as reported by a couple of news agencies, there was a stabbing that involved a Burnley fan that was in Athens for the match. Post-match, there was also a few louts, as they were sort of described by the news service, that I think there was like 30-odd people that were also arrested for being drunk and disorderly. But on the pitch, 3-1, as we constantly say. What was going on with some of the officials and the officiating, Louise? You want to just take us through that if you can, please?
Well, before I get into that, we know how strong Olympiacos are on home soil. They have a 100% record in UEFA Cup and Europa League qualifying, winning 6 games by an aggregate score of 18-4. So
Good luck.
they certainly had the upper hand. And yeah, as I touched on in the news headlines, Burnley's boss, Sean Dyche, felt the officials were a little bit biased and, wasn't really happy with the way the game played out.
Can you see any chance for Burnley to come back from 3-1 down, Damon?
I won't rule it out. A 2-0 result will get them over the line. I just think 3-1, Olympiacos are clearly in the box seat. I think Olympiacos definitely. I think too much experience. Burnley obviously haven't had a lot of European experience in their history. Olympiacos are usually in the Champions League, by this time. So I'm predicting Olympiacos will go through.
Yeah, I think there's been one too many lessons that Burnley have tried to hand out over the years, but I think this is the lesson that they are finally getting from their end. Unfortunately, one of the bigger teams, one of the bigger European teams that is constantly on the European stage, I think might be just have dealt them that one bigger blow too much.
Would you have, question?
Sure.
Would you have started Joe Hart over Tom?
Oh, it's a tough one because, well, yes. Let's put it this way. Yes, the experience that Joe Hart offers, yes. And just because I think Hart has played across a couple of different countries over the last few years because he has been very uncertain about his Manchester City days, I think that would have been just enough of an edge for me, if you're Sean Dyche, just to start him over Tom.
So why didn't he? Is it because he's saving him for the EPL this weekend?
Quite possibly. They do have Fulham. I think they are on the road this week, so at Craven Cottage. So quite possibly that could be the case. It might be the case that also maybe Burnley may not be taking the competition as seriously as we originally thought.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it's a matter of saving him. I don't think you need to save a keeper, just given the fact they don't use as much energy as an outfield player. I just think this is a case where, and we've seen it before, where managers use a different keeper for a different competition. Manchester United, when they were in the Europa League and they had that run and won the competition, they used Sergio Romero the whole way through and used David De Gea in the Premier League. Yeah,
possibly. I mean, it all makes sense. You're both right. I mean, it just depends how obviously he is managing this team. Like we've said, they are down to, I wouldn't say bare bones, but they've got a few injury concerns at the start of the season, and the last thing you want to do is ruin any form of chances across any competition you are playing in by obviously not playing your best and your fittest team. That's ultimately where it sort of does lie with me. But Atalanta 0-0, we've touched on that one before. Seville, that's probably the interesting one now because they do look like they are going to go through. They do have a 1-0 lead. Yes, they are currently top of La Liga. Yes, it is only after one match day, but they did look very, very strong against Real Betis in that 4-1 win with Andre Silva scoring that hat-trick. I wonder how they're going to balance things all of a sudden because they actually do look like they are going to go through. And if they can all of a sudden keep up that form that they showed last weekend, well, they've already started a season a month and a bit earlier than anybody else. They could be fatigued come February, March, which has been an argument of mine for however many years. What do you reckon?
Yeah, well, and I think that was a perfect move for Andre Silva to go to Sevilla. Of course, he was getting a little bit of game time at AC Milan, but maybe it wasn't enough. And now he's starting a new chapter. He's getting game time and he's scoring goals, more importantly. And, he's really coming into his own form and the form that we know him and we know that he has. So, I thought it was great to see him go to Sevilla, and it certainly boosts their chances, with the La Liga this season.
I just think it's such a long season for these Europa League teams. We saw Ivan Rakitic play 70 games last season. Some of these players would be playing 50 plus, I'd imagine. I really feel that they don't get that much of a break in the off-season. It's just so tiring physically and mentally. And I think that can affect their performance across multiple competitions. I think that may affect them in the La Liga this season.
Well, that's why you have to have squad depth so you can rotate.
Correct. So I guess it's one of those things we'll have to wait and see. Let's see how they actually do perform come, say, March. We'll see if they can obviously qualify. I think they now will. They're in the box seat to do that. But let's just see what they're like in March, whether they've sort of kept up this momentum, maybe even stayed in, say, the top 4, maybe even top 5, and then whether they still are competing across the Copa del Rey, La Liga, and, of course, the Europa League. Just quickly, very, very briefly, Basel, great to see them also there as well. Rangers, 1-0. Scraping through. What do you reckon? Can they do it? They do have to go to Russia now. One of the hardest places to play your football if you are a European team. What do you reckon? Any chance?
I'm not sure. I think, like you mentioned, Russia, that is one of the hardest places to play in world football. Perhaps 1-0 isn't enough. I think to score away from home in Russia will be incredibly difficult. So I think if they concede 2, I think they may struggle to progress.
Yeah. Well, next week, that's when the return fixtures will all be played, and we will know every single result and every single team that is through, because there will be obviously the Europa League group stage pot announcement done at the end of this month. So not long at all to go, and I think there will be plenty of surprises that still may occur. You might see a couple of, maybe one or two little, ones that throw up a few little things, and we'll have to wait and see. But guys, there's 5 big leagues to cover. And there's 90 minutes across Facebook Live and in our studio where you'll be able to obviously contact us, ring us up. We'd love to hear your thoughts. We'd love to hear what you think and how you think your team will actually perform this weekend across your respective leagues. But I reckon, guys, let's start with Ligue 1. Now, it has been going on for a couple of weeks. We are into round 3. It obviously has started off with the likes, or at the same time as the English Premier League. But this is the game that I'm most interested in. And why I'm most interested in is because it links back to a player that we have spoken about time and time again. And his name happens to be one Mario Balotelli. Now, why I'm interested in this is because he's finally come out and said a lot of things that we've all thought. That he was attempted to be poached by a big Chinese Super League team. And he's basically said, well, you know what? I'm not going there whatsoever. No chance. I am interested in actually playing my football in Europe at the very highest level. Now, he won't be available for this game against Dijon, but Nice have got a few little things that they need to iron out. They are obviously still languishing towards the bottom of the table. They're not quite down there yet, but they did lose, obviously, their first match. Or, sorry, they did win their first match. They lost last week.
They drew.
I think they
sorry,
lost the first match, drew the second.
Sorry,
Yeah.
my
1 point
apologies,
from
1
2
point.
games.
How important and how crucial is it that they actually get their season back on track after 2 matches?
Huge. I said last week that the game I was looking forward to was Nice in their second game, which they drew. So 1 point from a possible 6. They now play Dijon at home. Vieira's third game in charge. It's crucial that they get 3 points here. Otherwise, I think the pressure will start to mount on Vieira. An inexperienced coach, you would say. Only other experience was in the MLS with New York City. Crucial for 3 points here.
Yep.
Yeah, I agree. These clubs have to pick up points and as many points as they can early on, so it benefits them later on in the back end of the season.
Well, one team they definitely need to pick up some points because they did drop some last week. That is Lyon. Lyon travelled to Strasbourg. Now, Nabil Fekir has been out in the media this week. Obviously, he's the captain of the Olympique Lyonnais, and he's been saying the right things. He's been saying that he wants to stay, that he wants to give his all for his club, and he also wants to perform quite well in the Champions League. Well, you don't drop points against a newly promoted team. That's the first thing. If you are serious about making Europe and the best continental competition, you don't drop points against the new teams. And that's exactly what happened last week.
Agree. I wouldn't want to see teams like Lyon and Monaco drop off almost right away to let PSG destroy the rest of the competition. But I'm really looking forward to this game. Strasbourg promoted 2 seasons ago to Ligue 1. They knocked off PSG last season in PSG's first loss of the season. They got the 2-0 win away from home to Bordeaux. So I'm really looking forward to this. I want to see how Lyon respond because they're going to have to if they want to challenge PSG and return to the UEFA Champions League.
And they still are ahead of them on the table. I know it is only after 2 matches, but Strasbourg's 7th, Lyon 10th. So
10th.
Yeah. It's not a nice little position if you are a Lyon fan, but it is only after 2 matches.
That's
so
it.
we have to put this all into a little bit of context, I guess, so to say. Amiens Rams, obviously we've talked about Amiens being one of the new teams as well. Reims, I should say, not Rams, as well, a new team. They're obviously still flying. 2 wins from 2. Can they make it 3 from 3?
Yeah, why not?
Well, there's no pressure.
No.
There's no pressure at all. I mean, you can't say no to them because they've been playing some very good football. This is the thing. They've actually shown that even though they are in Ligue 1, it doesn't matter. They are playing out of their skins, beyond their skins even, so to say. But they are also getting the results 2 from 2.
Well, that's it. Now they've got the momentum, so can that be enough?
Also, the only team in Ligue 1 yet to concede a goal.
That's
They've only scored 2,
nothing
but-
wrong with 2-2 1-0 wins.
just 3 points at 3 points, yet to concede a goal.
Well, speaking of a team that they may have only conceded 1 goal, but they've been literally scoring them all the way at the other end. And I think you know what team I'm going to refer to here. Paris Saint-Germain. Paris Saint-Germain, they obviously take on Angers. They're in the match. I think it's the Saturday morning or Saturday evening match over in France. Is it one of those things where we say, how many?
how many goals they'll score this season.
And how
I
many
think
goals
so.
will they win by? Because, as we know, Angers, they're nearing where they were last season. They're nearing towards the bottom of the table. They're not, I wouldn't say languishing, but they are near there. Any chance that this one actually might be a rout, or do you think this might be a little bit tighter?
Yeah, I think this is a matter of how many. Talking about goals, PSG have scored 6 already over 2 games, conceded 1. So Mbappe's back, got on the score sheet last week. Neymar's fully fit, back in form. I think this is a matter of how many. Could be 4 or 5.
No word yet on Edison Cavani. That's the interesting thing. There really hasn't been too much talk about the Uruguayan international. Obviously, he did sustain that calf injury during the World Cup. He has been on an extended layoff period as well because of it all and because of the heavy schedule that the PSG had last season and his World Cup commitments. He's also been linked with the move away, so he hasn't been in this team just yet. It'll be interesting to see if all of a sudden Thomas Tuchel decides to pick him. So I think that one there's a wait-and-see approach, but if you get Neymar back to 90 minutes, fully fit and going at 100%, you get Neymar back as well. It's a matter of how many, not if. That's where I see it at this stage. But one team that actually has been also scoring plenty of goals, and these are brand new boys. They are also the other Rons. 2 from 2, 7 goals scored, 4 against. Nims. Now, I'm not going to profess that I know too much about them, but nonetheless, they do have to go on the road, if I'm not mistaken. I've just
Toulouse.
lost Toulouse. What do you reckon? Now, Toulouse obviously had a win, I think, first up, and then lost last week.
I think other way around.
Other
They
way
lost to Marseille on opening day.
There you go.
4-0.
Sorry, my apologies. Yes.
Yeah, but regardless, great to see him right up there with PSG on 6 points from a possible 6. They've scored 7, most in the competition thus far. So it'd be great to see 3 from 3.
Could they fall from grace? I mean, Toulouse is one of those experienced teams that you see in Ligue 1. They may not win too much, but they may not get into the top half too often, but then they sort of drift in and around and in and out. And do you reckon that experience might just hold them in a little bit more stead ahead of Nims? Or do you think their youthfulness, or at least their first-time approach to not being scared at all, might actually get Nims over the line and make it 3 from 3?
Look, it could go either way. I'm still backing Nims, just given the fact they've had a better start to the season.
Yeah. What about Nantes? Now, Nantes had a new coach in Miguel Cardozo, as we've mentioned before. They take a trip to Caen, which is a little bit down the road, not too far from them. Any chance that Nantes all of a sudden can get themselves off the bottom of the Ligue 1 table?
Well, they are at home, so they definitely have that in their favour. And I think they'll be desperate for 3 points. Obviously, Claudio Ranieri's former club last season, another change of manager. I think they'll be desperate for the 3 points.
Well, Caen are one of the worst defending teams at the moment. They've already conceded 4 goals, so that also needs to take into fact. And one of the issues that Nantes had last season in particular was their ability to score goals. Now, obviously, under Cardozo, they rearrange a little bit, and they become that little bit more attacking, and fans start to see them and actually want to see them play good football. So it'll be interesting to see if all of a sudden they can actually get more than 1 goal that they have over the last 2 games. What other results? There's plenty, actually. How's this one? Bordeaux v Monaco. Now, we've talked about Bordeaux, and we've constantly talked
Very
about Bordeaux.
interesting.
But Monaco. Monaco's the interesting one. Now, as we know, Monaco did slip up last week, but they did draw, obviously. But 6th, they want to try and get into that top 3, especially get back to second place to where they were last season. Bordeaux was one of those teams that they sort of, a little bit of a tricky proposition for them over the years. They've beaten them, but they haven't beaten them convincingly, or if they've drawn because they actually were favoured to win the match. So they've sort of constantly felt as if they've had to chase their own tail in order to get the result. This one here, still no real certainty over the Bordeaux coach. What do you think this one could do, Louise?
I think Monaco will get the 3 points, and even though they are a squad that has a lot of young and new faces, I still think that they'll get over the line this weekend.
Yeah, I think Monaco are clearly a superior team to Bordeaux. And just given the fact that there's still uncertainty around Bordeaux and their coaching position, and there's instability, I think Monaco are in the box seat for the win here.
And we'll wrap up the other games just very, very quickly. Montpellier, Saint-Etienne. Well, that promises to be a nice little game because there's going to be plenty of goals, I reckon, in this one. Lille, Guingamp. As we've said, Lille actually in 5th place. They've had a very good start to the season as well, 1-1. The final one, Marseille, Rennes. Now, Marseille dearth of attacking talent. Been in the news all week with regards to the Mario Balotelli saga. Rennes just doing their thing, mid-table at the moment. 1 win, 1 draw. Could they make a surprise? Could they somehow go to the Velodrome and steal 3 points away from their much-fancied rivals?
I think I touched on it before with Lyon and Monaco. Given the fact those two teams dropped points last week, so did Marseille. I think they'll be looking to bounce back as well because their aim has to be top 3 this year. They just missed out last season, which meant they missed out in UEFA Champions League. They have to finish top 3 this year. I think they'll bounce back and get the 3 points here.
Louise?
I agree.
Yep. Plenty more. There's going to be plenty more of these matches to be wrapped up because there are actually so many leagues we need to cover. There's, at least another 4 more to cover. I reckon what we'll do is we'll switch our focus a little bit over to Italy. Now, why we say with Italy, because we'll actually preview the German Bundesliga in our second hour because that is the opening weekend of the season. And no, it isn't just all about one team, and that is Bayern Munich. You guys did talk about it yesterday. I did tune in, so congratulations on all that sport. And I will actually have my rebuttal about what you guys were saying in that hour. So we'll talk about it in the second hour. But over to Serie A. 2 big games. Huge if you look at them. Juventus, Lazio, Napoli, Milan. Which one do you think is bigger?
Ooh, that is tough. I think just because Ronaldo is playing his first home game, I think you have to pick Juventus, Lazio.
Yeah?
I agree.
You don't think Napoli, Milan? Ancelotti returning. Oh, that's a big one.
What do you think, Rick?
I'm still saying Napoli, Milan.
Really?
Yeah, I think Higuain returns to the São Paulo for the first time in his new colours. The Master v Apprentice approach of Ancelotti versus Gattuso here. Technically Milan's first match of the season because of the whole Genoa bridge collapse, and they were meant to obviously play Sampdoria last week. I think this is the bigger game. Juventus-Lazio is, it is Ronaldo's homecoming to Juventus, but no. Sorry, I think Napoli-Milan just.
Yeah, look, perhaps you're right. Perhaps solely if you're thinking about a football match, Napoli and Milan is bigger. Like the points you mentioned, Ancelotti coaching against Milan. Milan, we really don't know what they're going to sort of put up this season. Higuain's first game. So I think maybe purely as a match, that game is bigger. But just as an event, Ronaldo playing his first home game at Juventus Stadium, I think that's a bigger event.
Yeah.
And what might be also a bigger event is there are rumours already starting to swirl around in relation to Lazio's big superstar midfielder, Sergej Milinkovic-Savic. The word is that he will re-sign with Lazio, but there actually might be a release clause for Juventus put in there. So obviously there is a target that one day the Serbian international would like to play at the Bianconeri. This could add a little bit more spice to it all. You throw in the fact that Ciro Immobile, the Lazio striker who signed a new contract during the week, will be going to Juventus, a former club of his that sort of launched him onto the stratosphere that he is now going on and playing. So there's a few of these nice little links all of a sudden. So where do you see this one going, though? Do you see this one being a convincing Juve win, or do you see this being a little bit of a high-scoring affair, or do you think this could be a 1-0 early goal by one team, sit back, park the bus, and try and walk away with the 3 points?
It won't be a walkover. I really rate Lazio. I think they can challenge for the top 4 this season. Let's not forget they defeated Juventus at Juventus Stadium last season. Only conceded a last-minute goal at home last season.
Correct.
So it almost got the better of them last season. I think Juventus will win. I think Ronaldo will score. Won't be easy. I think 2-1.
2-1. Louise, what do you think?
I'm going to say a draw.
You're going to say a draw. How high? How high, or will it be a nil-nil?
No, I think it'll be a 1-1 draw.
1-1 draw. Both teams to get a nice goal, and everybody to sort of go home shaking hands.
It's interesting to see how Allegri will line up. Obviously, Quadrado started last week, but Bernardeschi came on and played very well, scored the winner. Do you think he'll start?
I think Bernardeschi has to start on the right. And why I say that is I'd like to use Douglas Costa as a sub-player, just to sort of ease him back in a little bit. My big thing is, where will Allegri start Cristiano Ronaldo? Now, I've gone on record saying this a few times. Ronaldo's best position, and I feel his most comfortable position, is on that left wing, left forward type position. So that would mean that Mario Mandzukic starts as your centre forward, your number 9. I can't see Moise Kean being given the keys to this Juventus attack just yet. So I think the Croatian international will be the one who will actually be told to play as the number 9, Ronaldo on the left. And I think at least until he settles into the Serie A and he at least settles into the physicality of it all and the attention he will get now that he has made the move, I think starting him in his more natural position, his more natural playing position, might help him actually move forward, and then you can unleash him going from there.
I 100% agree that his best position is on the left. I'm not sure if Juventus have the luxury to do that at this point, just given that Mandzukic had a very busy World Cup. I think Ronaldo will start centre forward and Mandzukic won't start just yet. And I think going forward, they'll need Ronaldo to be able to perform at centre forward. So why not start it early?
Yeah. I can see, but like I said, we can see both logics and we can see where it all comes from. Just some other games. Spal v Parma. Spal obviously had a 1-0 win last week, whereas Parma obviously had a 2-2 draw where they were sort of coming back against Udinese. They could have actually won. They had a couple of
2-0, weren't they?
Up 2-0. They had a couple of chances there, and they should have actually gotten all 3 points, unfortunately, but they didn't. Cagliari, Sassuolo were the big story last weekend, weren't they? You know?
How did that happen?
Wow.
A win over Inter Milan.
A win over Inter Milan. When you think about it, it sounds very, very strange, but Inter against these smaller teams has been known in the past to falter, and that's what sort of led to their downfall from the second half of last season.
I said earlier in the week that Sassuolo are Inter's bogey team. Sassuolo defeated them twice last season, now a third time in a row. Maybe it's good for Inter to get that game out of the way early. And now they can progress up the table.
Well, speaking of Inter, they face another tough team in Torino. Torino last week, obviously a 1-0 loss to Roma, but probably could have actually walked away with all 3 points with the amount of options and opportunities they actually had. If you are Luciano Spalletti, the Inter Milan coach, you have to get a win here because you are playing at the Giuseppe Meazza, the San Siro, whatever you want to call it these days. How much buy would appease the fans? Because I don't think a 1-0 win is going to quieten any doubters about his possible departure from the club, considering the amount of money that has been spent on a lot of these new players. That's the first thing. And secondly, how many of these new boys will he play? Because we saw last week, Rajan Angolan was sitting in the stands watching a lot of other things rather than the actual football. What do you do? What do you do if you are the bald-headed tactician?
I'm not sure. Perisic also didn't start last week. Obviously had that busy World Cup as well. I can't say I'm too sure on the availability of players and the players in their squad. So I'm not entirely sure. But just on the win, I think a win will suffice, even if that is 1-0. Given the fact they lost on opening day, I think in their minds they will be challenging for the Scudetto this season. I think a 1-0 win will suffice, and I think they will get the 3 points.
Louise?
Yeah, I think they have to get the 3 points this week.
Doesn't matter how they get it?
No.
No.
As long as they score some goals.
That would be the most crucial thing. So that's where Mauro Icardi now all of a sudden comes into his own. Because
and Martinez, a beautiful goal from him would do.
That'd be beautiful.
That would silence the fans.
That would, a nice screaming volley, athletically driven into
what
the back
he did
of
in pre-season.
Against Atletico Madrid.
Magic.
Very goal. But also at the same time, he and Icardi especially now start to plan for their Argentina friendly that Lionel Scaloni will probably pick both of them and start to build a team around. So they probably want to get one goal at least between the two of them if they are both picked in this match. Another game that obviously will be actually quite intriguing, Frosinone and Bologna. Now, why I say it is because I reckon half the people that have probably tuned in don't know who Frosinone are, but Frosinone copped a shellacking. There's no other way to put it. They lost 4-0 to Atalanta. Atalanta obviously played in the Europa League the week before, and they obviously are still in contention at the moment. Frosinone need to bounce back. Otherwise, this could almost stamp their season, and we could be saying bye-bye to probably the first of 3 teams to drop down.
Yeah, I'm certainly tipping them to go down. Lost 4-0 away to Atalanta last week. Atalanta, I haven't really been able to get a read on them yet. They've obviously done well the past 2 seasons. But given the fact they've lost a couple of players, but to lose 4-0, it just points signs to me that they're going to go down.
Yep, and obviously Bologna did also lose 1-0, but they sort of seem to be the perennial mid-table team that can also scrounge out a result. So, but you would think here Frosinone might be at home, but Bologna might get the chocolates just not by much, maybe another 1-0 type result. Genoa Empoli, well, this is another one of those sort of mid-table team matches. Empoli obviously having come up this season. Genoa probably need a win here just to really, really almost, I wouldn't say settle the nerves, but at least ease themselves into the season after the whole bridge collapse saga that we are aware of. Obviously, their season is starting 1 week later than a lot of other teams. they probably want the win because this will be at the Marassi in front of their own fans. They probably will want all 3 points. And against a team that has just come up, you'd think you'd fancy your chances.
Yeah, I'm definitely tipping Genoa, and it will be great to see if they get the win. It'll just be that little bit uplifting after the tragic events that happened last week, tipping them to win against the new boys.
I also wonder, Sampdoria, they play on the road to Udinese. They would have started at home last weekend, but obviously because of the collapse, Udinese, like you did point out earlier, Damon, they came from behind. They were down 2-0 and obviously managed a 2-2 draw. Tougher opponent. What do you reckon? Do you reckon that somehow the Blu Cerchiati in Sampdoria can actually do a number? Or do you think that Udinese might just sneak something past?
No, I think Sampdoria may be able to get the win away from home. Udinese had a terrible season last season. I'm not sure if they have improved that much. So I think Sampdoria, again, it'll be great to see them get a win as well. Even if it is at Udinese's expense, I'm tipping Sampdoria.
Louise?
Yeah, look, I agree. I think given the events, what happened last week, maybe they will use that as momentum and, really put on a performance.
Well, speaking of momentum, the final match of the round, this is the Sunday night, Monday morning match, if I'm not mistaken, just quickly doing my maths in terms of date and time. Roma v Atalanta. Now, Roma obviously had a 1-0 win over Torino. Atalanta have been playing every 3 days for the last month or so because of the Europa League qualifiers. On paper, you would say Roma to win, maybe like a 3-1 type result. But Atalanta certainly, currently top of the table, they could actually do something.
Yeah, I disagree. I think Roma are clear favourites here, just given their new dynamic in attack. Obviously, Justin Kluivert has come in, provided a wonderful assist for the last-minute winner from Edin Dzeko. I think Roma can take a lot from that win last week. Away from home to Torino, who Torino played very well. Roma was still able to find a winner in the last minute away from home. I think Roma will be far too strong for Atalanta here.
Yep. No. I agree. I'm a fan of Kluivert.
I know you are a big fan.
He produces, so
he does.
And Roma are looking very strong this season.
They are.
They are really going to push for top 3, top 2, and I think they can go quite far.
I wonder if Brian Cristante will be given the luxury to play in this match. That'll be the interesting one. The former Atalanta man who did make a summer switch across to the Giallorossi. Vito's actually come through on our Facebook Live. I think this is in relation to Sampdoria. Need Fabio Quagliarella, Caprari, and Saponara. They all need to click. Well, if all 3 of those click, Vito, you won't be just getting 3 points. You'll be probably getting a nice 3-4-0 win, in all honesty, because if those 3 somehow do gel, they are going to go very, very far. Let me tell you that much. It wouldn't surprise me if Sampdoria all of a sudden maybe make a sneaky play and maybe make a Europa League qualifier come the end of the season. Now, there was also some information that came to hand in relation to a former Italian coach who's now at Chelsea. Now, it's in your notes, Louise, there. And I won't...
Looking at my notes.
Everyone else does. Maurizio Sarri. Now, former Napoli, obviously now at Chelsea. He's taken a different approach.
He has.
And it's almost a similar approach to what Thomas Tuchel did at PSG. I'll let you explain this a little bit.
A little bit not as full on.
Okay, go.
So we heard earlier in last month or something how Willian was really displeased with Conte and they had this tumultuous relationship. Willian actually said that Sarri is like the coach of his dreams because, he has this really relaxed approach and he makes everything really lighthearted and he wants them to have fun. And Sarri it's come out that he has a really relaxed approach to the players' training and diets, and that in turn gets different results as to what they formerly had. And I mean, you wouldn't really expect anything less from the chain smoker ex-Napoli coach. So he is a little bit, less full on as to what we've seen with Thomas Tuchel, who enforces this, lifestyle where the players have to have a bedtime at a certain time. They're not allowed to go out. They have to eat. He's cut all sweets from their diet and soft drink and
Just going
everything else.
Just going, I think that
The
a
one
little bit too hard.
percenters.
Yeah.
Well, no, I think that's good. One
You do?
percenters. If it gets the best out of your players, then why not? If you want to win the Champions League, why not? One percenters are the ones that count.
They are.
Anyway, Sarri actually even took extra steps in ensuring his players, he gets the best out of his players, and he set up a new system where he delays training. So the players can spend the mornings with their families and take their kids to school.
That's a nice little thing, isn't it?
Isn't it? So he's
I
really,
don't mind that.
really accommodating the Chelsea boys so they can kind of have the best of both worlds. Because we've seen, and I won't name, but we've seen how in the past couple of months, if you want to have a baby, then it's going to be very difficult for you to take time off and, let alone a week. So, I think Sarri's approach to the Chelsea team is quite good.
Yeah.
If it brings out the best in your players, then why not?
Well, they're 2 from 2 at the moment, so you know what? Whatever Maurizio Sarri is currently doing, keep at it.
They still do, however, their double training sessions.
Yes.
But it's just spread out later on in the day so they can
A little bit more of a
have family time.
Yeah, a bit more of a cultural difference to what is usually seen around footballers and training and approaching matches. It's just a different way of getting the same result ultimately, or in Chelsea's case, improving, because they are 2 from 2, which is always good to see. There's a whole heap of other news that we're going to get through very, very quickly here. Valencia and Gonzalo Guedes. Now, this is the interesting one because PSG seemingly wanted to hold on to him all summer. Now look like they might let him go, and Losque are in the prime position to take him. He'd be a very nice addition all of a sudden if you were to team up with one, either Simone Zaza, who might be on the way out, but most certainly a Michy Batshuayi. That'd be a very, very strong centre-forward pairing to possibly propel, all of a sudden, Losque into another Champions League campaign, combining with Rodrigo if they can keep a hold of him too.
Let's not forget Kevin Gamero, who's also come across from Atletico Madrid. So they're building a nice sort of front third. Valencia, like you said, finished 4th last season. They'll be looking to finish top 4 again this season. And they've also got a Champions League campaign ahead. So,
any chance, Louise, that Marcelino somehow, and this is the hard thing to actually believe, somehow can integrate all 3 of those forwards into the same lineup? This is the biggest question, I think, that he has over his head. Because Rodrigo has, as we saw last week, got the goal, starred against Atletico Madrid. Michy Batshuayi, new league, new team, needs time to settle in. Gonzalo Guedes will probably come across and probably won't settle in for another week or 2. So that'll almost take him to the break, to the international break. Can you see somehow Marcelino maybe making a little bit of room, maybe pushing Rodrigo more out in a wide flank to accommodate these guys? Or do you think one starts in either Guedes or Michy Batshuayi and the other then comes on as, say, a 60-minute sub?
Well, that's what they did last week. He came on as a sub, Batshuayi. So...
Well, he came on because he obviously hadn't acclimatised himself
That's true.
to La
First
Liga,
game.
didn't settle in, hasn't moved across, obviously, from England
Played in the
completely,
World Cup.
played
Yeah.
in the World Cup. So there's a few little factors. But now, obviously, he's had an extra week. The
Yeah.
removal van's probably flown in from somewhere that's dropped off all his stuff, and he's probably put that away into a nice apartment somewhere in the middle of Valencia. I don't know. It's going to be very interesting to see what they do, especially. I reckon, in all honesty, I reckon Valencia is going to be the surprise packet this season.
they've certainly got weapons, haven't they?
Everyone's focusing on the big 3, but I think Valencia is the one that everyone needs to pay attention to. I genuinely believe that if they can keep their stars on the pitch, and if Jedfrey Kondogbia, especially Danny Parejo, can have a really good central midfield combination, their backs are fine. Neto, Gabriel, Ezekiel Garay, they're fine. Yes, a bit of age on their side, but the rest of their team, if those two can gel in the middle of Parejo and Kondogbia, watch out. Really watch out.
Hopefully they can make it really interesting in the top 4. They just finished behind Real Madrid last season. And obviously with the loss of Ronaldo, perhaps they can expose that and and finish in the top 3.
And we'll obviously preview all the remaining La Liga, Bundesliga and EPL matches in our second hour as we actually hop across in a moment's time as just we are finishing up from our Facebook Live. There's a couple of other comments that have sort of come through that we'll probably touch on. Vito as well. Forza Empoli. Well, Empoli, as we sort of alluded to, they did have a 2-0 win in their opening match. Fingers crossed, like we said, but doubtful that they can obviously go 2 from 2 against Genoa. Adrian Mbappe to Real Madrid. That's a little bit of a change of tune from my regular co-host. He was arguing the opposite. He was arguing Neymar would be the one, but nonetheless, we will actually have a discussion with him in the second hour on that as he enters the studio in a moment. And guys, that's actually all the time we have left. Friday's already flown. First hour of the show here, Afternoons on FNR, has already been completed. Guys, everybody at home, thank you very much for tuning in on our Facebook Live hour. Do stay actually with us. Tune into our FNR app or do tune in via our website, www.footballnationradio.com. We will be actually going into the studio, just having a quick water and a quick moving across, a couple of steps down the road. Thank you very much. I've been Rick D'Andrea, joined by Damon Palmer and Louise Taffer here. We'll catch you on the other side of this break. Yes, thank you very much for tuning in to FNR, Afternoons on FNR here on Football Nation Radio. I've been your host, Rick D'Andrea, Damon Palmer, Louise Taffer. Have a good weekend. Speak to you soon.